One of the strongest things that we can see from that short film is we've not been standing still. We're investing in new technology, we invest in our services so that we're fit for the future, and so that people in Scotland can access our services where and when they need that support. Before we move on to hearing some really emotional stories and evocative stories from some of our volunteers for their awards, I wanted to speak for a few minutes about volunteering and why it forms the backbone to what we do. Today, our network benefits from the time and energy of nearly 2,500 volunteers who have chosen to be part of our services and bureau from Shetland to Dumfries. And it's important to remember that people, if they're looking for a new opportunity, a new place to invest their time, have a lot of volunteering options. But they chose us, they put their trust in us, and we put our trust in them. Volunteering is at the heart of our service. We massively rely on volunteers not only to deliver advice and information, but also to help us manage our bureau, to fundraise, talk to the world on social media, and be our representatives in communities, which is hugely important. I think this is a fantastic story and a clear example of localism in practice. Services available in communities, provided by people who live in those communities, for people who live in those communities. Some may feel this is old-fashioned. I would strongly argue that if CABS didn't exist today, many academics and policymakers would be looking back at this type of service and suggesting it as an efficient, effective model of service delivery in the future. It would cost a huge amount of money to do this, and it further emphasises the value for money that you all provide day in, day out in your communities. The average amount of time our volunteers give in a bureau is 6 hours a week. I know that many do far more than that, but even at this estimate, if that was paid at the minimum wage, there'd be a wage bill in Scotland of £10 million a year. So there, and many of you in the audience's commitment and dedication to your communities is a massively important contribution to our work. Rory touched on this morning. The ask of our volunteers is huge. The ask of our paid staff is huge. And I know this and genuinely recognise the complexities that brings. Each volunteer across our network receives professional training. And that training isn't just about transferring knowledge and benefits or debts or housing. Volunteers who have been through our training programme tell us about how confident they feel and about how our training has empowered them to go on to support others, about the skills they've mastered. They've become confident experts in some of the most complicated areas of day-to-day life and are making a real difference to clients who are often people in their own neighbourhoods and in their own communities. This process takes a number of months or sometimes years, go at the pace that's suitable to that particular volunteer. But that ensures that volunteers can provide comprehensive, holistic advice and advocacy to customers. Even though these services are often provided by volunteers, members of the public quite often won't necessarily know this is because whether an advisor is paid or not is completely irrelevant. What is important is the quality of the advice and support given, not whether or not someone is paid to give that advice. And the high quality offered to them allows many volunteers to go on and find employment. Over a third of our volunteers get back into full-time training employment. That's a fantastic record that is, I would imagine, the envy of many volunteering organisations across Scotland. Some of them go on to get paid employment with our CABS as well, and that conveyor belt, I think, is really, really important to how they do that. So you'll hear Rory talking in a bit about many examples of people that's here today and up for awards in particular categories. And there are so many examples of people that make their own contribution, whatever their own personal circumstances, often putting the Bureau's needs before their own. And the volunteers' compassion, commitment and dedication across the breadth of our service is genuinely extraordinary. Probably want to give a couple of examples for me of what that means in reality. Most of you know that we lost a Citizen Advice Bureau in North Ayrshire last year, and I'm glad to say that we are very, very close to re-establishing one again. I went to meet a volunteer there, Bob, and just to call him a volunteer, he set the CAB up, and he was 49 years ago, and he was still involved in the CAB 49 years later. What an incredible commitment to his community. And the numbers of people that he'd helped over that time would have been into the thousands. And he was a volunteer, but he provided a whole range of services. He was the chair, he was the vice chair, he was the manager. He did everything for that. And for him to give that type of commitment was incredible. And, you know, which I genuinely do think is. I get contacted by another volunteer in writing. It was a very harsh letter, it would be fair to say, when we made the decision to partner with DWP to deliver a universal credit service. And I know that that tested a lot of us in terms of, you know, what are we here to do? And her letter was very emotive, it carried a lot of emotive language, but it came from her heart. Now, she was just finishing her training, and she said, I'm never setting foot back in my cab again. I'm disgusted with what you've done. And for me, it just, there's no amount of explanation can get to the bottom of that. Now, I tried to get a hold of her to talk to her about that. I'd phoned her a couple of times and couldn't get her in. And I couldn't get her in because she was in the cab, volunteering. And, you know, for me as the chief executive CAS, thinking I've got a busy life, I'd eventually get her at 5:30 on a Friday because she was working 9 to 5 in the cab. At that time, I think she thought I was phoning up to get her out, and I said, I'm not getting you out. I just genuinely want to understand where you're coming from in this, maybe give you an explanation, regardless of what you've read in social media, or what you've read in the press or whatever, the reason behind what we're doing. And once I'd spoken to her for about half an hour, one of the best things that I've had in this job was when she said to me at the end of that conversation that she now could go back into her cab, she could go back into a local co-op, and she could walk up a local high street with her head held high because she was a volunteer with Citizen Advice Bureaus. And that for me meant the world to me in terms of what that was like. And that's what it's like. These people are in communities, serving those communities on a daily basis, and I think it's fabulous. But all volunteers have their own unique and compelling stories. They are the backbone of our service, and without them we wouldn't exist. Volunteering brings enormous benefits, not only to beneficiaries, but to communities and to volunteers themselves. We know that, among other things, volunteering increases civic participation, empowers communities, and reduces loneliness and isolation. It can also improve mental and physical health and foster a greater sense of belonging. Think of the saving to the public purse that this brings. This isn't just something that's widely discussed, I don't think, or in terms of widely recognised. But this investment in people costs money, but also offers, as we all know in this room, a fantastic return for that investment. So the Scottish Citizen Advice Network is part of a wider and really energetic volunteering force across the whole country. People who give up their time without fanfare or reward, but because they believe in a fair society. Every year in Scotland, volunteering contributes over £2 billion to our economy, with nearly 1 in 3 Scottish adults volunteering in some capacity. With young people, the number is even higher, and recent figures from the Scottish Government found that over half of young Scots are volunteers. A wonderful number to hear, and probably different to what most people would think of young people in this day and age. So I'd like to see more young people coming into our bureau as clients, and I'd love to work with everyone here today and how we can support the development of the next generation of volunteers within our network without in any way ignoring the current generation that are there and providing fabulous services. So given all of that, I'm determined that the value of volunteers is not disregarded or misunderstood. This part of our service is vital, and we must support people to thrive as volunteers across our network. Thank you.